Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I'm gonna go over every movie I watched in January. Leave a like and let me know which movies you saw this past month in the comments. Let's get started. I started 2023 with The Maltese Falcon, starring Humphrey Bogart. A private detective takes on a case that involves him with three eccentric criminals, a beautiful liar, and their quest for a priceless statuette. This is considered the first major film noir ever made. Without this, many of my favorite movies of all time wouldn't exist. While it deserves props for pioneering a genre, I feel like the movies it's inspired are better than this original. 3 out of 5. A few days later, I rewatched David Cronenberg's The Fly. When Seth Brundle makes a huge scientific and technological breakthrough in teleportation, he decides to test it on himself. Unbeknownst to him, a common housefly manages to get inside the device and the two become one. This movie is great and has spectacular 80s practical effects. I watched this with my girlfriend and the effects actually made her throw up. 4 out of 5. I followed up The Fly with The Invitation from 2022. After the death of her mother, Evie is approached by an unknown cousin who invites her to a lavish wedding in the English countryside. Soon she realizes a gothic conspiracy is afoot and must fight for survival as she uncovers twisted secrets in her family's history. Don't confuse this movie with The Invitation from 2015. That movie is actually good, whereas this movie's garbage. If you've seen the trailer, then you've seen this movie, I promise. The marketing department must not have consulted anyone because the movie's twists take way too long to happen if you know they're coming. If you know what Carfax Abbey is, you'll have it figured out very soon. 1 out of 5. A couple days later, I rewatched a Goofy movie on Disney+. The film follows Goofy and his son Max and revolves around the father-son relationship between them as Goofy embarks on a misguided mission to bond with his son by taking him on a cross-country fishing trip. The music is what holds up the best here because the animation feels marginally better than cheap straight-to-video animated movies. 3 out of 5. After watching a Goofy movie, I went to the theaters to watch Megan. A brilliant toy company roboticist uses artificial intelligence to develop Megan, a lifelike doll programmed to emotionally bond with her newly orphaned niece. But when the doll's programming works too well, she becomes overprotective of her new friend with terrifying results. Releasing in a month known for terrible movies was bold. Audience expectations were definitely low for anyone going into Megan, and surprisingly, it's very good. The humor crafted by Akela Cooper is just as tongue-in-cheek as her Malignant script, and Megan also has smart commentary on technology's relationship with child raising and what our future might look like. Think giving an iPad to a baby in a stroller. 3.5 out of 5. After Megan, I watched The Endless by directing duo Moorhead and Benson. Two brothers return to the cult they fled from years ago to discover that the group's beliefs may be more sane than they once thought. The Endless goes in an unexpected direction, and to fully appreciate where the film is going, you're gonna have to watch Resolution, released in 2012 by the same directors. Fortunately, I had seen that movie already, although it was more than a year ago, but I liked Resolution more than The Endless. I would start there, and if you like the director's style, I'd continue. 3 out of 5. I followed The Endless with a rewatch of Who Framed Roger Rabbit on 4K. Toon star Roger is worried that his wife Jessica is playing patty cake with someone else, so the studio hires detective Eddie Valiant to snoop on her. But the stakes are quickly raised when Marvin Acme is found dead and Roger is the prime suspect. The 4K Blu-ray is amazing. I totally recommend scooping it if you're a fan. If you've never seen this bona fide classic, you're missing out. 5 stars. The next movie I watched was Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody. The joyous, emotional, heartbreaking celebration of the life and music of Whitney Houston, the greatest female R&B pop vocalist of all time, tracking her journey from obscurity to musical superstardom. Overall, I feel like for such a grand celebrity, the movie feels small scale. What the movie does right, I feel, is showcase not just the emotional personal life of the star, but actually showcase her music. I was disappointed with Elvis in that respect. If you're gonna have a movie about one of the greatest musicians ever, the music should be from that musician and not contemporary remixed trash. If you like Whitney Houston's music, you'll enjoy the film. 3 out of 5. The next day I crossed a big movie off my watch list, Paul Verhoeven's Basic Instinct. A police detective is in charge of the investigation of a brutal murder in which a beautiful and seductive woman could be involved. Possibly the quintessential erotic thriller. Paul Verhoeven is the king of sleaze. Everything is about sex except sex. Sex is about power. 4 out of 5. Next up, I watched Boiling Point. A head chef balances multiple personal and professional crises at a popular restaurant in London. I went into this movie completely blind, so it was a surprise when I realized this is a one-shot film. I actually couldn't notice any attempts to hide cuts, so I was impressed while watching it, but then I did some research after watching the film. It actually was filmed in one 90-minute take, which is incredible because it really did feel like a real busy restaurant. The film has great tension overall, and it feels like a very realistic Hell's Kitchen episode. 3.5 out of 5. A couple days later, I watched Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai. Ghost Dog is a contract killer, a master of his trade who can whirl a gun at warp speed and moves through this world like a phantom, stealthy and evanescent. In the spirit of the samurai, he has pledged his loyalty to a small-time mobster named Louis, who saved his life many years before. RZA from Wu-Tang Clan composed the score from the film, so if you're a fan, you definitely have an idea of the vibe the film is going for. Forrest Whitaker is both hitman and samurai. He'll steal a car and listen to some hip-hop on his way to a contract. Then you'll hear Ghost Dog read some passages from the samurai code as he meditates and trains for the next contract. Featuring one of the best kills by a hitman in a movie I've ever seen, you gotta check this out. 4 out of 5. I followed this up with Plane in theaters. After a heroic job of successfully landing his storm-damaged aircraft in a war zone, a fearless pilot finds himself between the agendas of multiple militias planning to take the plane and its passengers hostage. I hated Plane personally, but a lot of people seem to have a lot of fun with this and other Gerard Butler action flicks. I think he has as many, if not more, than Liam Neeson at this point, so you probably know if you're a fan or not. For me, it's a 1.5 out of 5. The day after Plane, I rewatched Saw on Blu-ray. Obsessed with teaching his victims the value of life, a deranged sadistic serial killer abducts the morally wayward. Once captured, they must face impossible choices in a horrific game of survival. The victims must fight to win their lives back, or die trying. I'm a fan of the Saw series, so I couldn't pass up on watching this when my girlfriend was the one to suggest it. She'd never seen the first Saw, so I was excited to revisit this. The first Saw is probably the best movie in the series, but I always have fun watching these. 4 out of 5. The next day, I was hoping to watch something good at the theater following Plane, so I watched Corsage, a fictional account of 1 year in the life of Empress Elizabeth of Austria. On Christmas Eve 1877, Elizabeth, once idolized for her beauty, turns 40 and is officially deemed an old woman. She starts trying to maintain her public image. The film is just under 2 hours long, but it feels way longer than that. It hits a lot of the same notes as films like Marie Antoinette and Spencer, so if you're a fan, this movie is for you. I thought those movies were just fine, and this was worse. 2.5 out of 5. After Corsage, I wanted to watch something in my wheelhouse, so I went back to the Saw series, with Saw 2. When a new murder victim is discovered with all the signs of Jigsaw's hand, Detective Eric Matthews begins a full investigation and apprehends Jigsaw with little effort. But for Jigsaw, getting caught is just another part of his plan. 8 more of his victims are already fighting for their lives, and now it's time for Matthews to join the game. I watched Saw 2 with my girlfriend, and it was a success because she liked both Saw movies, and now we're ready for Saw 10, which takes place chronologically in between these two. I like horror movies with a large cast of victims stuck together. Cube is another one that is similar that I like a lot. 3.5 out of 5. Next up is a horror movie with a lot of buzz, Skinamarink. 2 children wake up in the middle of the night to find their father is missing, and all the windows and doors in their home have vanished. The film is experimental, but it does achieve the feeling of being a little kid and waking up late at night, confused. Your eyes and imagination play tricks on you like you're in a sleepy daze. The film has a couple well done setups for some scares, but my general impression was that it's too long and should have been a short film. I was eventually bored of seeing the house's walls and Dutch angles for the millionth time. 2 out of 5. The same day, I decided to watch Blue Steel. Megan Turner, a rookie New York City cop, foils an armed robbery on her first day, and then engages in a cat and mouse game with one of the witnesses who becomes obsessed with her. The setup to the movie is interesting. It feels like a detective and serial killer cat and mouse, but it's a uniformed cop and a weirdo witness. Overall though, I thought the movie was forgettable. 2.5 out of 5. A couple days later, I watched Primal Fear. An arrogant, high-powered attorney takes on the case of a poor altar boy found running away from the scene of the grisly murder of the bishop who has taken him in. The case gets a lot more complex when the accused reveals that there may or may not have been a third person in the room. The intensity builds when a surprise twist alters everyone's perception. of the crime. I'll start off by praising the title of the movie because even though it tells you nothing about it, it sounds cool as hell. Richard Gere plays an attorney here, but he kind of functions like a detective in a noir film. I think the key takeaway here is Edward Norton's performance though. However, I do think that too much stock is put on that performance. The film's good, but it feels like a basic procedural until the third act. 3 out of 5. A couple days after, I watched Roadhouse. The Double Deuce is the meanest, loudest, and rowdiest bar south of the Mason-Dixon line. Dalton has been hired to clean it up. He might not look like much, but the PhD educated bouncer proves he's more than capable, busting the heads of troublemakers and turning the Roadhouse into a jumping hotspot. But Dalton's romance with the gorgeous Dr. Clay puts him on the bad side of cutthroat local big shot Brad Wesley. Roadhouse has got a bit of everything: fist fights, knife fights, gunfights, explosions. The list goes on and on. Basically, it's everything you'd want from a sleazy and cheesy 80s movie. I had a blast watching this, and it's probably my favorite Patrick Swayze movie, although I have yet to see Point Break. 3.5 out of 5. I followed up Roadhouse with Robert Altman's The Long Goodbye. Detective Philip Marlowe tries to help a friend who is accused of murdering his wife. This is my second Robert Altman movie, the first being The Player. There was some video on YouTube trending of two actors discussing their favorite directors, and one of them was making the case for Altman being the best director. At least with the two films I've seen, I disagree. This film inspired Inherent Vice and movies of that style. The lead kind of eventually solves the case by the end, but the journey there is all about encounters with people that are usually funny or violent. This was better than Inherent Vice, but I didn't love it. 3 out of 5. Next up was John Carpenter's Christine. Geeky student Arnie Cunningham falls for Christine, a rusty 1958 Plymouth Fury, and becomes obsessed with restoring the classic automobile to her former glory. As the car changes, so does Arnie, whose newfound confidence turns to arrogance behind the wheel of his exotic beauty. Arnie's girlfriend Lee and best friend Dennis reach out to him, only to be met by a Fury like no other. I actually saw this spoofed on Futurama way before I even knew this was a movie or a book. As a follow-up to The Thing, this is disappointing, but then again, The Thing failed when it came out originally. What the film does right though are the practical effects of the car crashing and repairing itself. I believe this is getting a Blumhouse remake, and I think it will probably be better if it leans more into the humor of the premise. 3 out of 5. I followed Christine with Evil Dead, the 2013 remake. Mia, a young woman struggling with sobriety, heads to a remote cabin with a group of friends where the discovery of the Book of the Dead unwittingly summons up dormant demons which possess the youngsters one by one. This was a rewatch of the uncut version on Blu-ray, which I highly recommend. This is without a doubt one of the best horror remakes of all time. It did its own thing, and it excelled. I'm very hyped for Evil Dead Rise to come out, and I think they haven't mentioned if it's the same universe as Evil Dead or not. So I just wanted to rewatch so I'd be ready to catch any Easter eggs. 4 out of 5. The next day I watched The Hunted, directed by William Friedkin. In the wilderness of British Columbia, two hunters are tracked and viciously murdered by Aaron Hallam. A former special operations instructor is approached and asked to apprehend Hallam, his former student, who has gone rogue after suffering severe battle stress from his time in Kosovo. Tommy Lee Jones and Benicio del Toro are the main protagonists of the film. The overall vibe feels like something from the 80s or 90s. Think The Fugitive or First Blood. The film is always about the chase, and at 94 minutes, it's exhilarating all the way through. You can't go wrong with this movie if you're in the mood for a chase and some hand-to-hand combat between the two leads. 3.5 out of 5. I was in the mood for another hunt, so I watched The Hunt for Red October. A new technologically superior Soviet sub, the Red October, is heading for the US coast under the command of Captain Marco Ramius. The American government thinks Ramius is planning to attack. A lone CIA analyst has a different idea. He thinks Ramius is planning to defect, but he has only a few hours to find him and prove it, because the entire Russian naval and air commands are trying to find him too. This is the first film in the trilogy of Jack Ryan films in the 90s. This is the only one where Alec Baldwin plays Jack Ryan, but honestly, this movie is definitely all about Sean Connery. The film is exciting and well made and straightforward. 3.5 out of 5. Next up, I crossed a movie off my watch list that I should have caught in theaters. Waves. The epic emotional journey of a suburban African-American family as they navigate love, forgiveness, and coming together in the wake of a tragic loss. This is the type of movie where you should go in as blind as possible. I didn't know anything about the plot, so I was surprised by everything that happened. The cinematography is spectacular and reminds me of Euphoria. In fact, you might notice a familiar face if you're a fan of the show. Buckle up for a highly emotional film. 4 out of 5. Next up, I wanted to watch a film with Oscar buzz before the nominations were revealed, so I watched After Sun. Sophie reflects on the shared joy and private melancholy of a holiday she took with her father 20 years earlier. Memories real and imagined fill the gaps between mini DV footage as she tries to reconcile the father she knew with the man she didn't. I think most people that watch After Sun have an emotional response to it. It has interesting cinematography that works well with how the film follows memories and the mini DV footage. I personally couldn't connect to the characters, and I felt that practically nothing was done to make me care about the characters early on. I can tell it's a deeply personal film, but at least for me, I think it would have been better as a short film. Some memories are just not cut out to be feature length. 1.5 out of 5. Back to another William Friedkin movie, I watched Bug. In Oklahoma, Agnes, a lonely waitress living in an isolated and dilapidated roadside motel, meets Peter, a quiet and mysterious man with whom she establishes a peculiar relationship. I believe the film is based on a play, so it mostly takes place in one location, but that location works well. I think the film is an interesting study of how falling in love with somebody affects you not just emotionally, but mentally as well. The highlight here is Michael Shannon absolutely killing it. The film doesn't start off crazy, but once he shows up, things start to escalate and the movie kicks into a higher gear. 3 out of 5. Next up, out of curiosity, I decided to watch a film I never thought I would. Fantastic Four from 2015. 4 young outsiders teleport to a dangerous universe, which alters their physical form in shocking ways. Their lives irrevocably upended, the team must learn to harness their daunting new abilities and work together to save Earth from a former friend turned enemy. I grew up on the other Fantastic Four movies from the mid-2000s, and those weren't particularly good, to be honest. This was touted as way worse than those, so I just avoided it on release. I would say that up until the movie has a time jump of 1 year later, that it's not terrible and just mostly mediocre. But after that time jump is a different story. 1.5 out of 5. The last movie I watched in January was Princess Protection Program, because my girlfriend wanted to watch a bad Disney Channel movie. When an evil dictator threatens to take over the kingdom, Princess Rosalinda gets put into the Princess Protection Program. She is taken under the wing of General Joe Mason, an agent from the agency, and his daughter Carter, who works after school at a nearby bait shop. The appeal of rewatching these Disney Channel movies is the cringe factor, to be honest. They are obviously not good movies and they're very formulaic. This one in particular is a very hard watch because of the cringe. 1 out of 5. That wraps up everything I watched in January. If you like these videos, leave a like to support the channel. If you have your own thoughts on the movies I watched this month, leave them down in the comments. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more movie reviews and lists.